Hey everybody, Bonehead for the Bonehead podcast, and welcome to Theory Thursday. Every week we get together and we have a look at one specific area of Blood Bowl. We take a deep dive and find out what we can learn, whether it's stats or strats. Basically, we're just trying to get an edge on our opponent every single time. Now, one of you guys, or two of you guys, actually suggested this as a topic. I'm really sorry, I can't remember who mentioned it, but I wrote it down and I was like, we need to get to that because that's a really fair shout. So today, what we're going to be having a look at is Apothecaries and Regeneration. Basically, everyone knows that Apothecaries are useful, but we're going to break down statistically how beneficial they are for League, for a tournament play, and how Regeneration just fits in. It's a good way to refresh ourselves on the rules and actually figure out just if they're worth their inducement costs. Okay, so Apothecaries, what are they for? They are specifically for keeping players around. So if you are playing an exhibition match or you're in the final, something that really matters right there and then, there are two modes that the Apothecary is going to play. Basically, it's going to be there to try and keep your player on the ground, on the pitch, ready to go. So you can have one Apothecary rostered to most teams. Those teams that can't have them, maybe just stick around and look at the regen rules at the end of this video. But you can also take, up to 0 to 2 Wandering Apothecaries, and they're about 100k a piece. So when you are playing up against somebody with a higher TV, who are perhaps a bit more of a killy team, having these Apothecaries are going to save your team, not just for now, but also for League. So for knockouts, straight up, this is going to keep your player on the pitch at stunned instead of a KO. So when the armor is broken, your opponent rolls on the table to find out whether you are stunned, whether you are knocked out, or whether you are casualtied. If you are knocked out, you can immediately use an Apothecary. Now, Apothecaries do not work on journeymen, mercenaries, or star players. That just doesn't happen, so bear that in mind. But if it is for a rostered player and that player is knocked out, immediately you can say, I play my Apothecary in defense mode, you have triggered my trap card, and he is now stunned instead. That is it. You burn your Apothecary, but that player remains on the pitch. You do not have to try and 4+ him at the end of the drive. He just stays there stunned. Now he's going to be out for a good couple of turns essentially, but it doesn't matter. That player's not going away. He is going to be there. He might get fouled, but he's still going to be on the pitch. Okay, that's the easy bit. So, and probably goes under the radar a little bit. You can use your Apothecary to keep somebody knocked out on the pitch. Normally, Apothecaries are taken with a view of two things. Keeping casualtied players and putting them back on the bench ready to go at the next drive. But secondly, now I think the majority of Blood Bowl is played with League in mind, and this is why this is so important. Apothecaries are going to massively, and I mean massively, and we'll have a look at the stats of this in a second, protect your players from permanent harm. So if you are SPP farming, maybe you've already got somebody who's got a ton of SPP and a ton of skills and they're really precious to you, Apothecary is going to help keep them around. But also, if you are starting out on the League and you have paid out, you have forked out for a positional, you don't want them to die. You do not want your passer, you don't want your thrower to suffer -1 edge or -1 passing. You don't want them to suffer those skills. You don't want your star blocker or blitzer to suffer a niggling injury, because that's just going to collapse in on them eventually. So the casualty element here of the Apothecary is to keep your players in reserves right there and then for the game, but really it's there to protect them over the course of a league to make sure they keep playing. But I guess we've got to think about this. How likely is a player to actually get casualtied? If you think about it, every time a player gets knocked down, they've got to roll against your armor. So what we've got here is AV8+, that's the Skaven lineman of the world, AV9+, that's your human lineman of the world, and human blitzers and stuff like that, and you've got AV10+, those are for the dead-hard orc players and dwarf players out there. This kind of gives you a breakdown here of armor versus the likelihood of them even rolling on the casualty table. So we're going to have a look at the casualty table in a second and find out just how bad it is for you. But if you think about it, what they have to do is break your armor and then roll a 10, 11 or a 12 on a 2d6 roll. We're going to ignore claw, we're going to ignore mighty blow and stuff like that for the time being. Basically, 1 in 6 armor breaks is going to result in a roll on the casualty table, or the injury table. So AV8+, 6.9% chance of getting casualtied per armor break. Armor break, or actually just per punch. And AV9+, 4.6%. So basically 1 in 20 times the AV9 players getting knocked down is going to be a casualty. So that's got to be pretty good if you're brewing up a human team with a star thrower or something like that. He needs to be knocked down about 20 times to suffer a casualty, and that includes everything from badly hurt to badly dead. And then AAV10, so your dwarves, your black orcs, you know, the big tough players, 2.8% chance of them being casualtied on a knockdown, essentially. And what does that break to? That's 3%, so that's 1 in 33 times, so you should be okay. However, what's going to happen here is that you're protecting your player from that spike, from that 1 in 30 times where actually they do get knocked down and they do get to roll on the bad chart. And here is the bad chart. So 1 through 6 is badly hurt. Basically the player is out for the rest of the game, but there's no further impact on them at all. They just come back next time as if nothing had happened. 7 through 9, and this is all on a D16, so 38% of the time it's going to be badly hurt anyway. Badly hurt is fine. If you play in League, it's fine. And we'll come back to the way the Apothecary interacts with badly hurt in a second. Miss next game, 19% chance, so 7 through 9. They are going to be out for this game and for next game. That means nothing to you in tournaments. In fact, this whole thing essentially means nothing to you in tournaments. Niggling injury, 10 through 12, 19%, again around about 19%. They're going to miss next game and they're going to have that niggling injury, which basically gives +1 to this roll every single time they get a niggling injury, which isn't going to be great as things progress. So niggling injury, make a note on the team draft list this player has picked up a niggling injury. There is a +1 modifier to all future rolls made against this player on the casualty table per niggling injury they have, which is +1 to this table here. But miss next game, at least. Then you've got the really bad stuff. So niggling injury is okay, like you're going to miss the next game, and it's going to mean that the more they get beaten up, the quicker they die. 13, 14, so a 1 in 8 chance here, 13%, 12.5% really, a stat decrease. Now that's going to be a roll of a d6. 1 and 2 is -1 armor. That's probably the one you can get away with most of the time. It does mean that that player is likely to be out more and more and more, but it is serviceable, especially if it is a non-combat positional, a catcher, a gutter runner, a thrower, something like that. You're probably going to be fine with it. -1 movement is a 3 for a smashed knee. That can hurt some players, but if you're looking at a blocker or a blitzer, going down from 5 to 4 if they're a blocker, or 7 to 6 if they're a blitzer, isn't the end of the world, and you're probably going to be okay with that. Broken arm on a 4 is going to be a free roll for most players here, because it's -1 passing. This is only going to affect passing throwers, because the rest of players are already had their arms broken, essentially. Neck injury on a roll of a 5 is -1 agility. That's going to hurt almost all players that don't have rubbish AG anyway. Okay, so AG 5+ players aren't really going to mind going to AG 6+. They weren't blitzing, they weren't dodging anyway. And a -1 strength on a 6 is going to be a killer for the majority of players. However, some catchers and almost all throwers are going to be fine with that roll as well. Now, there is one thing to mention here, is that the FAQ came out recently, and if a player suffers a minus stat to something that simply can't get worse, they roll again. So if you've got a snotling and it suffers -1 strength, you're going to take another hit to a different stat instead. So bear that in mind. Not the worst thing in the world. You just fire them at that point, but you know, it's one to remember, especially if your Ag 6+ piece takes a -1 Ag. Means something else is going wrong instead. But that's the stat decrease, and then you've got the worst stat decrease of all, which is from life from 1 to 0, death, on a roll of a 15 and 16. So 13 or 12.5% of the time, if they break your armor, you are gonna die. That is a 1 in 8 chance of death. I don't know what's worse here, the stat decrease or the death. Basically, there is a 25% chance your player is gonna get ruined. Alright, niggling injury isn't too bad, but there's a 25% chance that you are going to get ruined, and that is where the Apothecary comes in to play. Because the Apothecary allows you to make your opponent roll again on that table. Okay, so we've just looked at the results. Your opponent rolls again, you get 2 separate results, and then you, as the player in control of the player that's being crippled, get to choose the result. So if they roll a badly hurt and a dead, you are free to choose the dead, but I would probably recommend the badly hurt. So the key here with an Apothecary is if you roll a badly hurt result, using an Apothecary, Okay, if there is a result of badly hurt available after the use of an Apothecary, that player instead goes into reserves immediately. And that is why Apothecaries are so useful in tournament play, in exhibition play, because if your player gets smacked around but badly hurt, you can make your opponent roll a second dice, completely ignore it, take the badly hurt result and put that player back into reserves. So very much like with the knockout, actually the knockout gets turned into a stun. Badly hurt casualty gets turned into a reserves, so you get that player back at the next available drive. That is huge. So this slide here, we look at how likely that is that you are going to get that player back immediately. So there's a 38% chance of a roll of 1 to 6 badly hurt being made. If you use the Apothecary and have them roll another dice, the chances of you ending up with one or two badly hurt results for you to pick from is going to be 61%. So if you've got that Apothecary and your really important player gets taken out, using that Apo is going to give you a total of a 61% chance to bring that dude back. That is going to be massive. Okay, from that player being out, and I mean out, for the rest of the game, to using that Apo to a 61% chance of them being just put back into reserves, ready to go. Not even knocked out, just straight up, ready to go at the next drive, is massive. So that's it from a tournament like right now, I want players on the pitch kind of view. You've got the knockout straight there, you've got the badly hurt into your reserves. Now we're going to look at this from a point of view of league. Okay, we looked at the results, we discussed and probably agreed that death is bad and losing stats is going to be just as bad as death for some players. We want to make sure that our players have no permanent effects. So there's a couple of results here that can be lumped into that. Miss next game is brutal, but if I've got an accurate leader thrower, I'm happy missing next game. I'm much happier than I am to have them be made useless with no effects in the future. So no permanent effect here. We're looking at result 1 to 9, which is about 56% of the time. So already more than half the time, your dude who gets smacked around is going to suffer no permanent effects. They might miss the rest of this game and they might miss the rest of the next game as well. But after that, they come straight back with no effects. No niggling injury, no stat decreases, no life decreases. They come back good to go. If you've got an Apothecary, that goes all the way up to 81%. So this is where I'm sitting. So I've got my star gutter runner. I love him. He's got skills. The entire league hate him. You know, I've spent a ton of time brewing up that nobility thrower to actually have accurate so that I can start throwing passes as like a real boy. 81% of the time, it's going to be fine if I've got that Apothecary. Now that is on top of actually the armor already being broken, which for armor 9 plus was like, what, 6% of the time? So you can even look at this and say, if I've got an Apothecary and there is a 6% chance, okay, 94% of the time, I'm going to be fine anyway. And then 81% of the 6% that I'm not okay, I'm going to be fine too. So basically, if that dude gets knocked down, you've got that spare roll. Okay, you get to roll again, miss next game, badly hurt. Both of those results are going to end up in your player returning in a game in 2 games time, good to go. Obviously, this doesn't really matter in a tournament setting. You're focusing on badly hurt to sneak them into the reserves box. But for a league player, for a player you've spent time brewing up, 81% of the time, it's going to be fine. And if we reframe this with a view of fear, because Blood Bowl is about fear management in a way, Casualties, your player gets smacked around a little bit. What are the chances of them having a permanent disability? Whether that is a niggling injury, which means they're more likely to die in the future, a stat decrease, which means they're a little bit dead to you right now, or a death increase, which they are actually dead. If your player gets knocked down, your armor gets broken, you get to roll on the casualty table for them. There's a 43% chance now. 43% of the time, something bad is going to stay happening to this dude. Okay, 4 out of 10 times, you're going to get something bad happen. Not just miss next game, but niggling injury, which means they're more likely to get injured in the future. Stat decrease, which means they are fundamentally going to be worse players. You know, even a blocker that's movement 5 going to movement 4 is worse at movement 4. Okay, it's just a thing. Alright, there's passing now, which is good, because that means 1/6 of the time you're probably going to suffer something that is never going to come up. That is kind of beneficial. And then, of course, there's death. So, 43% of the time when you get your armor broken, it's going to be very bad for you forever. Okay, permanent effect, though, with an Apothecary does drop to 19%. So you can save that Star Gutter Runner with an Apothecary. But it is still going to be a 19% chance of that player being permanently worse forever. And talking of being worse forever, death is definitely a description that would say my player is worse forever. Because he is gone. Absolutely gone. Moreover, is he gone, there's potentially a chance he's going to come back as a zombie, which I think is quite offensive and hilarious, especially when they join your team. Because, I mean, we've all played in League, we've all played in events, and when that undead coach kills a dude, or the Nurgle Rotter kills a dude, and they join their team, and they've got the same name, and then they convert the model to look like the model they killed, it's just good storytelling, and that's why we love Blood Bowl. Anyway, Apothecary time. If you get punched in the head repeatedly, there is a 12.5% chance of death being a thing that happens. With an Apothecary, though, that drops down to 1.5. So if you think back to that Armor 9+ player, there's a 6% chance of them being casualtied, and there's a 1.5% chance of, within that 6% window, of them being murder, death, killed. So it's a very small chance of your dude dying with an Apothecary. That's a heuristic. Take that away. The Apothecary takes it from a 1 in 8 to a 1 in 64. 1 in 64 are odds I am much happier with for my star player. And I did promise we'd look at regeneration, so let's blitz through this right now. So regeneration can stack, and there are some teams that have regeneration and Apothecaries. I'm thinking vampires, they can have Apothecaries, and they've got regenerating vampires. Trolls on all teams can take Apothecaries, and you can use it on that. Nurgle can't take Apothecaries, but, you know, that's fine. There are other regenerating players. But before we even get to that, regeneration, what does it do? Okay, before you do anything, you have to use the Apothecary. Once you have used the Apothecary, then you get to choose to use regeneration. In fact, you may not even get to use regeneration. It might be automatic. So note that the use of an Apothecary comes before any other attempts to heal the player. This includes the use of any skills or traits, i.e. regeneration or other in-game effects. So you must use your Apothecary before you get a chance to use regeneration. However, what regeneration does is give you a simple d6 die roll, and on a 4+, everything is fine anyway. That player's arm just reconnects, that player's head just forms again, and they carry on with their merry little life. So if you pass it, it's no effect, and you go straight into reserves. If you fail it, everything we just did with the Apothecary, everything your opponent just did to you by rolling 2 16s on d6s, comes into effect. And if you have failed to regenerate a death, you will die. But there's something you can do to make your regeneration a little bit better. So this works even in teams that don't have Apothecaries. So we've got a little sub-heading here of almost Apothecaries. So reroll regeneration. A mortuary assistant for undead teams gives you an opportunity to re-roll a failed regeneration roll. And the Plague Doctor does so for Nurgle as well, but does allow you to turn a knockout into a stun in exactly the same way as Apothecary. Undead one doesn't work like that, but the Nurgle one does. So Plague Doctors are good for you, okay? It's not quite bacon, but it's still good for you. That gives you a 75% chance of whatever that roll is on the casualty table just going away, and you rocking straight back into the reserves table. So if you think about the fact that with an Apothecary, getting a back on the pitch result was what, something like 61%? If you've got one of these guys, it's 75% that they go straight back in. So if you are an undead team, if you are a Nurgle team, and you've got a mortuary assistant or a Plague Doctor, when you want to use it, you have got better odds of getting them back on the pitch right now than you do on the other one. However, where you don't have an Apothecary, you don't get an opportunity to choose between two results. So you've got more chance of something going wrong, but you've got a better chance of getting them back on the pitch right now. And therefore, if you've got a 4+ save to ignore everything, okay, death goes down to a 6.25% chance. Definitely not the 1.5 or whatever it was, the 1 in 64, but it is a lot better odds. And given that most of the players that have regeneration have already died once, it seems a little bit unfair to decrease the chance of them dying again, but what are you going to do? Okay, so that basically wraps up Apothecaries. You're looking at this chart, you get to roll twice, and you get to pick a result that you want. If you happen to choose a badly hurt result, your player goes into the reserves immediately. That's going to help you play the game you're playing right now, but most importantly, and I think we broke it down in unnecessary detail, is those players that you want to protect for your league, the guys you're brewing up to get SPPs, to get skills that are very important to your team, whether you want to get a lot of guard on your dwarf team because you hate your friends, or whether you want to get accurate on your nobility thrower because you want to pass like a real boy. Those are genuinely some of the things you're going to be wanting to protect using your Apothecary. Now, you can only use one Apothecary at a time, but if you get a chance to take some Wandering Apothecaries, you will be able to protect more of your players, and at that point you can use them to keep players on the pitch that you're not too fussed about them getting badly hurt. In most teams that have multiple positionals, if it's a badly hurt anyway, don't roll it with an Apothecary. Badly hurt is going to be fine. Okay, if one of your two blitzers gets badly hurt, suck it up, it's going to be fine. If you're a nobility team and one of your bodyguards gets badly hurt, suck it up, that's going to be fine. But as soon as something bad happens, as soon as that stat decrease happens, then you want to be thinking, I am happy to burn this up right now to keep that player okay for the next few games, for the rest of the league, for the development of the team versus right now. But if you've got Wandering Apothecary, go nuts. Turn that knockdown into a stun and keep that player on the pitch. In league, you need to protect your investment. If you're playing a one-off game, go crazy and play for the win. Anyway, guys, please let me know if you've got any questions with Apothecaries, when you use them, if it's a good thing, what I've missed, if I've got some numbers wrong. I do appreciate you guys breaking that down. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and we'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy healing! Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to support the show even further, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Or come and join us in our Patreon, link below, where you get early access to our content and monthly competitions. See you later.